can't believe you did this to me! Were you happy?
Hello everyone, this could be an absolute ramble. Shout out to Nathan. This might be a ramble. I haven't got any notes. This is an idea that came to me when I was talking to my students in a lesson yesterday, and as they were doing a presentation on the current state of the music industry and what they predict for the future. That's like this assignment they do, and they hit on something really interesting, and it made me think about the way that the current newer generation interact with celebrities, and how that has has got implications for like counterculture and the personal connection to celebrities and the personal slights if there's issues and things like that. And I just thought it was really interesting because basically one of the students made a really interesting comment that some artists will have a huge backlash on something they've done. It isn't necessarily a political thing. It could be just that the audience don't like something they've just made, musically. They don't like the music. And that becomes a personal betrayal rather than just, oh, I don't like that album or I don't like that song, which is what it would have been in the past. It's more of a personal betrayal because of the way that they approach entertainment and their what they interact with on their phones and their relationships with celebrities. It's a lot more personal. So they know a lot more about the celebrities. They want to know a lot more about. They accidentally know more about the celebrities. They are able to talk to them personally because a lot of celebrities use social media themselves. So some of them have a team, and you can kind of tell which ones are which. But some, very famously, some absolutely love social media and they go on there and they love talking directly to the fans. And you've got this different dynamic. And if you compare that to the 60s, 70s, 80s, where celebrities were put on a much bigger pedestal and they were a little bit untouchable, and to speak to them would have been a much bigger deal and would have been more unusual, and they're a little bit more mysterious. You don't know as much about them, and you certainly wouldn't know some of the details stuff you do know nowadays. It is really interesting that there's this much more personal relationship with celebrities in general. So this would be the case for music artists, musicians, songwriters, blah, 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 which is where this is coming from. But obviously we talk a lot on the channel about, on lots of booktube channels, about whether you should separate the art from the author, whether you should separate the writing from the author. So I personally do try and do that. If there's something that I don't agree with from the author and it's in the text, that's different, but I do try and be aware that something can be appreciated while I'm not particularly don't really relate to the author's lifestyle or ideas. So a good example of that would be Charles Bukowski, who I was going to have another look into him because I recently read Women again. It was a reread of Women and I didn't enjoy it, and that kind of made me think maybe I should reread everything again and see if I'm just different than I was when I was really into him. He made a massive impact on my life for a very specific reason, but his very downbeat, almost existentialist, nothing matters, humankind is full of regret, disappointment, loss, lack of God, all these different negative sides of Bukowski's writing. That kind of made a very positive impact on me when I was a teenager for some reason, and it made me relax a little bit on my expectations of life, my expectations of me, and it helped me through a bad time. So I've got that from him. So whatever, even if I feel like I don't actually appreciate his stuff like I used to, which is going to be an interesting thing I'm going to find out in the next year or so. But if I do find that out, I know that he still gave me that. He gave me a lease on life, a take on life, a motivation in life that is almost a strange flip of what he was doing. But I'll always appreciate that regardless. But I know as a person, I would not have had much respect for him or whatever. But his writing, and I think his poetry does. A lot of his poetry, I think, is really interesting and speaks to me, and has influenced mine. So shout out to Matt Wall, by the way, for the amount of times that he talks about Bukowski and talks about him really well. So yeah, I love Matt Wall's videos on Bukowski. So anyway, I do think it is important to separate the creator of art, whatever art it is, music, films, books, that kind of whatever, unless it's in the actual art itself. But I do also think it's really interesting, fascinating, that the newer generation are not going to really find that as easy if their entire approach to entertainment is much more personal. And I think that's a real key thing to understanding why the cancel culture thing has been such a huge part of the newer generation's interaction with celebrities in the last sort of 10 years or whatever, and the impact of social media, the impact of celebrities directly talking to people, and the impact of their having this no barrier now between ordinary people and celebrities means that they are judged a lot more, and the things they create are absolutely wrapped up in them themselves. And there wasn't that thing before. I mean, I had no idea what. Yeah, sorry, the iPad ran out of room. I just made a small room. I just wanted to add that I had no idea what a lot of the people that were my initial heroes when I was younger thought about anything. Sometimes you had some information from magazine interviews. Now and again, some of them would appear on TV, but authors never appeared on TV, really. I've found some old footage on YouTube now that clearly it did happen sometimes, but it's very rare to find anyone except Stephen King being interviewed on TV. So, TV interviews weren't necessarily a thing. Magazine interviews, you might get some of those, but again, not really with authors very often. You might get it with musicians. But again, they're still pointed questions. They're not... You couldn't have a conversation with them. It's going through a journalist. So it's a very different dynamic now. That's the message I'm putting out across that I think is really interesting. And it'd be really cool to see whether there's any kind of discussion that can happen in the comments, because I do think it's a different dynamic. The relationship that the newer generation's got with celebrities is totally different to the one that I grew up with as a Generation X guy. The celebrities were removed from us. We didn't know much about them, and what we did know was usually connected to questions that were about the art they created, and wasn't necessarily that many personal things we found out about them. So I do think it's really interesting that whole dynamic's changed, and I think that is a huge reason why any kind of controversy is now much more seen as a personal betrayal and much more of a something that people can't ignore. There's some things that are just political points anyway, and that's different. But I think some people have been, like my student brought up the idea of the Arctic Monkeys album that came out, and everyone was annoyed by it because they didn't like the music. I was like, everyone. But it's had a bad press because of some people not liking the style of it. And you think back on some other people that, like Bowie's changed his style so many different times, and in these days, would that have been received in the same way? When people were accepting that kind of change in style, that frequent change in style from someone like Bowie. And there's a few other examples of that, obviously. So, yeah, I do think it's kind of fascinating that the actual nature of the way people interact with celebrities on here, because they're all obsessed with their phones, how that's changed it all. I mean, the dominance of the phone in people's lives has changed everything. I do use it a bit. I do use WhatsApp and all that sort of stuff. I do use my phone now, but for a long time, it took me a while to get into that. But that's why I think I said in another video that the Generation X people are seen as digital migrants, as in we've learnt to do it, rather than the boomer generation that haven't really coped with how to use an email and stuff like that. And then obviously the new ones grew up with it, so it's like literally part of their everyday lifestyle. It just runs through their blood. But yeah, it does have a knock-on effect on the way they interact with celebrities. What do you think? I think that's quite interesting. What do you think?
Paint me a picture of what it's like to be